All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I'm going to do something a little bit different today, and that is I'm going to go over, as you can see in front of you, about 50 ASP.NET, Active Server Pages.NET, Model View Controller, or MVC interviewer questions. Now, I have neither the time, nor the inclination, nor the desire, probably nor the ability to go over all 50 of these in the depth and breadth of coverage that they probably deserve. However, I want to go over the main ones because I'd like to put this out there so that people who are interested in starting to learn about ASP.NET MVC would be able to do so. You can see how relevant it is. Today is May 29th, so literally this came out 8 days ago. And the author says, if you're planning to attend a .NET interview, you may also be prepared for ASP.NET MVC interview questions. ASP.NET MVC is the framework used to build web applications for .NET and C#. That pretty much is what the ASP.NET the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Website Development Program 1111 .NET Framework with Web Databases is all about. All right, so the author says, I list 50 ASP.NET MVC questions and their answers. Now, just a little bit of warning, so to speak, ahead of time. Again, not only am I going to skip several of the questions, but some of the questions are repeated, either directly or indirectly. All right, so we may go over some of them more than once. The answers are code examples written by authors of C# Corner. And if you look, that's where this is from. All right, so I'm not going to 100% agree with everything that's said in here either. Although I would say that the people who wrote this know a lot more about it than I do. All right? So let's just get started. Number one, what is MVC? Model View Controller. Now notice it's a software architectural pattern. So in other words, it is a way of writing code. All right? It says there it divides given software application into 3 interconnected parts. It's what is referred to in MVCs, so to speak, as this separation of concerns. As it says, so as to separate internal representation of information, all right, which is basically your model, from the way the information is presented to, all right, well, when you present information to the user, that's the view. When you accept information from the user, that's pretty much the controller. Now, again, these are my points of view. Other people may look at this, what I'm doing right now, and say, oh, he's wrong about this. Okay. MVC is a framework for building web applications using a model view controller design. The model represents the application core. For instance, a database or a list of database records. The view displays the data. Could be the records, could just be a table, could be a subset, could be just a record. The controller handles the inputs. So a request comes into the controller. The controller typically will send the request to the model. The model will do whatever it has to do with it, which could be handling the request itself. It could be calling a database server to get information or whatever. That information is sent back again to the controller. The controller calls the correct corresponding view to display, so that the view can display that data to the end user. And it says the MVC model also provides full control over HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Sometimes I think that's lost a little bit in here. And what I mean is that we're still building database-driven websites in this class, but we're concentrating as much, if not more so, on the server side. Whereas in the AWD Application and Website Development 1000, Web Development Technologies class that students take during their first semester, that is a class that concentrates on the client side. Now, I don't totally agree with this picture. Why? Because when you look at this, this makes it look like the view and the model communicate directly with one another. I'm not saying that's an illegal thing to do, but really the way I draw that is I would have the controller, I would have this arrow right here going both ways. I would have this arrow right here gone, and I would have this arrow here going both ways. So in other words, I would do this. I would put this out there. I don't even know if what I'm about to show you will work or not, or if you care. But I would come in here with my eraser, and I would erase this right here. So that would be the first thing that I would do, would be to get rid of that. Then the second thing is I would come through here, and where we've got this, I would basically add, again, an arrow going this way. Now that's not written very well. I don't even know if we've got a double-edged arrow in here. I can see there's one that goes this way. You know what I'm saying? But let's see. See, I don't want to go there. I want to go like that. I want to go from here to here. All right? I think you understand what I mean. So I'd remove that arrow. This arrow would go in both directions. This arrow would go in both directions. All right? Again, that's just my take on this whole thing. All right. So the MVC model defines web applications with 3 logic layers. The business layer, which is your model logic, the display layer, your view logic, the input control, the controller logic. All right? As it says, often model objects retrieve data and store data from or to a database. The view handles the display of the data. The controller handles the user interaction. I agree with all that. The MVC separation helps you manage complex applications because you can focus on one aspect at a time. I'd agree with that wholeheartedly. All right? It also simplifies group development. Different developers can work on the view, the controller logic, and the business logic in parallel. The other thing that I like so much about this article is they have these things. Learn more about, and there are hyperlinks for virtually every question, if not for every question. So this overview of MVC is from C# Corner. And I'm not going to go over it because a lot of it is stuff that they've already gone over. But they explain the model in detail. They explain the view in detail. They explain the controller in detail. Again, I don't like that arrow. Okay? I like the fact that this goes back and forth. The controller and the view. Well, I guess this is okay, the controller and the model. But notice here, I wouldn't put this in. All right, but again, that's me. Not everybody may agree with what I'm saying, and that's what makes it a world. Okay? All right. Question 2. What are the advantages of MVC? The biggest one is this, right here. SOC, or separation of concerns. The MVC framework provides a clean separation of the user interface, the business logic, and the model or data, in much the same way that when you are working on client-side website development, you strive for a separation of concerns between your HTML, your CSS, and your JavaScript. The other thing I'd mention on here is testability. ASP.NET MVC provides better testability of a web application, and it's better for test-driven development, or TDD. All right. Question 3, explain the MVC lifecycle. Now, the thing about this, just so you know, when you look at this, This is high level. It says a web app has two main execution steps. First, understanding the request, and depending on the type of request, setting out the appropriate response. The application lifecycle is not different in that it has two phases. First, to create a request object, and second, to send a response back to the browser. So, MVC requests are mapped to route tables. In other words, a request comes in and there are multiple controllers. And these route tables have to specify the correct controller to be called that has the correct action to be invoked. All right? So that's the fill route. The fetch route, as it says, depending on the URL routing module searches the route table to create a route table object. Step 3, the request context is created. Step 4, the controller instance is created. They show it pictorially here, and there's an article on it. This is much heavier than we get into it in the class. And some of it, at least, it's not so much that it happens, what would we say, underneath the sheets, but you don't see this stuff happening directly. All right, next. What different types of returns, different return types of a controller action method are there? Well, we're going to be concerned a lot with a view result. As it says, it's used to return a web page from an action method. But as you can see here, there are several others. We will talk about some of these others. All right, you will see them in action, so to speak. I'm going to go through the first 10, and that seems like it'll be a pretty good place to stop. Question 5, what are filters in MVC? In MVC, controllers define action methods, and these action methods generally have a one-to-one relationship with UI controls. In other words, you click a button and you make something happen. But many times, as it says there, we'd like to perform some action either before or after some kind of an operation. That's what filters are used for. All right? And there are several types. They are shown right there. What I do not want to do at all is to spend so much time going over this stuff that your head's spinning. All right? So I'm not even going to go over number 6, which is what are action filters. Question 7. Explain what is routing in MVC. What are 3 segments for routing, or what are they? Why are they important? As it says, routing is the mechanism used to process the incoming URL, or Uniform Resource Locator, that is more descriptive and gives the desired response. In this case, the URL is not mapped to a specific file, as was the case in the earlier days of websites. There are 2 types of routing as of MVC 5. They are convention-based routing and attribute routing. I like this. Routing is the URL pattern that is mapped together to a handler. Routing is responsible, Routing is responsible for incoming browser requests for a particular MVC controller. All right? You've seen some of this stuff when we've looked at routing a little bit, or we will in class. The controller name. All right? So in other words, that's what you're going to say. If you're mapping for that route, that will be the default controller that you'll be using. The action method, which will be the default action method to be called, and the parameter, or which typically is optional. Question 8. What is a route in MVC, and what is the default route? Again, a route is a URL pattern mapped to a handler. As it says, it can be a physical file. It can also be a class that processes the request. There's a lot of different ways that this stuff can be and is handled. All right. Question 9. What is the difference between temp data, view, and view bag? All right. And they give this chart here. View data is used to pass data from the controller to the view. So is view bag. All right. View data is derived from the view data dictionary class. It is only available for the current request. View bag, the way I look at it, is view bag is just that. Imagine it's kind of a bag that can hold anything. So you can put anything in the world you want to inside of it and kind of use it the way you want it to be used. The thing about view bag, though, is it's limited in focus. All right? Like view data, it's available for the current request only. All right? And like view data, if redirection occurs, its current value becomes null. Whereas view data requires typecasting, this doesn't require typecasting. So again, you can use it with any type of data. Temp data, as it says, is used to pass data from the current request to the next request. Now, was that a great explanation? No. If you want more, as it says right there, click right here. And you'll get a C# corner article on the differences between view data, view bag, and temp data. Question 10, what is a partial view? Now, one thing you have to understand, all right, one thing you have to understand is when we, for example, when we created the gym website, in fact, I probably have it here someplace, because I'm recreating it with my class, one of my classes this semester. So when we look at this, all right, I've got up here the header section. And notice it's the same header section. It doesn't change even if the web page changes dramatically. This doesn't change. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is the way that this is typically written for the client side is you have to keep creating that again and again and again. On the server side and with server-side languages, you don't have to do that. Basically, when you create a partial view, I look at it that it's something that you can drop into a web page. All right? So if we wanted every single page to look like this, with a header over here, a footer here, a left menu here, and the only thing that was different was this dynamic content, I would think you could use a partial view or partial views to do that. Back before we talked a lot about MVC or Model View Controller, what we talked about earlier than that was we talked about something that was called a master page. And on a master page, which you used with ASP.NET Web Forms, all right, you did stuff like this. All right, so that's the first 10 questions. I'm at 19 minutes, so I'm going to stop right now.